Hi, I'm Cheryl Costa. Welcome to Mystical Mentors. And I'm your host, Cheryl Costa. I am a retired priestess. And that's what I have to tell you. What kind of priestess? It doesn't matter. I used to be Wicca. I've been cross initiated into half a dozen other things. I spent 7 years in a Buddhist monastery. What I am is a mongrel. Okay. Spiritually wise, I am a mongrel, but I'm going to teach for those of you who came to the show to learn a little bit of magic every week. Well, we're going to do that in the last half hour of the program. But today I've got some really cool guests with me. And we're going to talk about something that if you're going to be in the pagan community, you need to understand because it's a foundational element of the pagan community. Okay. All right. I think we need to start with the word divine feminine, but we also need to use a word called parthenogenesis. Okay, and what is that? It's a big scientific term. Well, it's the idea of virgin births. Birds do it, bees do it, crayfish do it, some kinds of sharks do it. Okay, doesn't need a male, but it just does need a female. Okay, now if you look through our history, history is littered with virgin births. Most people think, oh, the Mother Mary on Christmas with the little baby. No, 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 no. Let's see. In mythology, the sky goddess Nut from Egypt, she gave birth to the sun god Ra. Okay, and a good joke we have is he is a fun god. He is the sun god. He is a fun god. Rah rah rah. But okay, we won't go there. That's for another day. Um, so this whole idea of virgin birth goes across many cultures all around the world. Okay. And we've got two guests here today who can talk about it. And I'm going to introduce both of them individually. The first one, and here's her book. Let me get this right where I can do it. Okay. And Johnny's going to put up the whole book for you while I read the bio. Marguerite Mary Rigoglioso, PhD, is the foremost authority on the history of virgin birth and has taught graduate and undergraduate courses in both the United States and the United Kingdom. The founding director of the Seven Sisters Mystery School, she is the author of The Cult of the Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, the Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, and she lives in Western Massachusetts. Marguerite, welcome to Magical Mystical Mentors. Haven't got that yet.
It's not in your DNA yet, Cheryl.
No.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming. Now, the other aspect of this thing is this is most what Marguerite's going to be talking mostly is Western deity and Western concepts. So let's go to the other side of the world and we're going to talk about the Chinese aspect of this. Okay, the divine feminine. And my guest for this is Rosemarie Anderson, PhD, Professor Emerita, Episcopalian priest and award-winning researcher, presents a new, startling, beautiful translation of the Tao Te Ching, one that emphasizes the mystical, the poetic, and the feminine elements of this classic Chinese text. In a time when human aggression and aggrandizing motives threaten the life of this planet and her creatures, the message of we, act without acting and do without doing, is a timely reminder for us to embrace a selfless tenderness. Now, for those of you who are already magical, those lines of act without acting and do without doing sounds pretty zen, also sounds pretty mystical magic, doesn't it? Okay, welcome Rosemarie Anderson. How are you?
Fine, thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Okay, let's Marguerite, how about like an elevator speech about what you're trying to get across?
Yes, this book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, is all about how Mother Mary was an actual lineage priestess of divine birth, that this didn't just happen to her, but that she deliberately planned it and willed it along with other members of her holy family. And the source that I use for that material, for that evidence, that research, is a kind of little known gospel called the Infancy Gospel of James. It's really about Mary's infancy, and it has nothing at all to do with James, except that supposedly James wrote it. So that's basically what the book is in a nutshell.
Okay, okay. As a pagan and as a priestess of Isis, I get annoyed when people say, "Well, see the beautiful picture of Mary holding the baby Jesus," and I said, "Yeah, that's a Roman copy of an Egyptian picture of goddess Isis holding her son Horus." You know,
Yeah.
this idea of virgin birth, at least among the gods and goddesses, tends to be stolen by other cultures. I've noticed it. Don't you think so?
Well, it's a complicated question because by some accounts, Isis, for example, walked the earth. She was a netter. She, like Mother Mary, had a life in which she walked the earth, and then she had a kind of an ascension to further levels of her spiritual growth. And according to the seers Rudolf Steiner, Isis was Mother Mary's incarnation prior to her final incarnation as Mother Mary. So as I see it, and that feels like truth to me. So in both of these lives, she was a woman who was going into higher and higher dimensions of her ascension until as she was Mother Mary, she made her full ascension into eternal goddesshood. But in her lifetime as Isis, she was practicing divine birth technology so that she could give birth to Osiris, but it was a different method than when she was Mother Mary. So the similarities of those statues is not accidental. It's that Mary was kind of practicing and replicating herself throughout the years. That's just a viewpoint that I've come to embrace and understand and find the medicine in. So it might throw a little wrench in what you're saying, but it adds some interest and spice to our conversation.
I've long felt, judging from some reading that I had done, that Isis was not just a made up goddess. Okay. And that she was a flesh and blood human at one time. And probably as we're later, 1,000 years later, so with the Greek pantheon. I think that's probably why they still teach it in school. If it was all just myth, I don't see why they would teach it in school. Okay.
Right.
So,
Yeah, this has to do with the crossover between third dimension and the dimensions beyond the veil, and the moving between those veils that certain beings have been able to do. And of course, we all do that when we die, and we all do that when we're born. We move across dimensions, but this is about beings who have achieved a certain high level of functioning, and they really are able to do that back and forth thing, that coming out and in and out thing in a much grander way. And so, yes, it may well be that a lot of these so-called Greek gods and so forth were master beings, the goddesses especially. There are stories about Demeter walking the planet, that they were master beings who were with us in the third dimension for a while, gave us great benefactions, great gifts, and so forth, and then kind of went off into the netherlands, not to be seen again, except perhaps through their priestesses on some level.
Isis has always been presented to me as a mother. And as I became a priestess of Isis 30 years ago, it was, I am a priestess of Isis. I am about service, sacrifice, compassion, and love unto all things. Those are motherly virtues, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Right. So as you can see, Mother Mary was already if we hold to the view that was Mother Mary's previous incarnation, she was already very much working with these qualities and principles. And the late Hindu saint Sri Kaleshwar says that Mary actually had millions of lives before she perfected herself as Isis and then Mother Mary. And really, in a sense, the only difference between the two lives is that in her life as Isis, she was working with a tantric technology that had to do with a phallus. And in her life as Mother Mary, she let go of the phallus altogether. She was able to become the masculine feminine within herself and then conceive and give birth to Jesus.
It is about that mixed energy, isn't it? It really is.
That's right. It's funny, Cheryl, because for 10 years or whatever, as I've been writing this material on divine birth, I've been holding the idea that, well, it's really the feminine that gives birth to everything, and the feminine that can parthenogenetically give birth. But as I'm even rereading my previous research and what's in my own books, I'm realizing, oh, they become the androgyne, or they become the hermaphrodite energetically, while she's maintaining her womb and everything. And that it's in that action that the conception of the egg is able to happen. So it's still a male female energy action happening, even though it's within the container of the female. And that's, I think, what the meaning of the yin yang is, that it's the masculine feminine, but it's within the ultimate container of the feminine. So it's kind of like a both and an in and out, and it's paradoxical, and we have to hold both of these things at the same time.
A poem that I wrote some time ago, it's called The Between Beast. And one of the lines said, I can radiate male, I can radiate female, I can radiate both, I can radiate all that is. I am pregnant with universes.
Wow. Well, that's quite beautiful. I mean, really, truly.
This is kind of where we're going with this.
I'd like to have that poem. Yeah, because there also was a sacrament known, I think, in the Gnostic, the early Christian times, that they called, I think it was the wedding, or the inner wedding. And it's one of these rituals, the marriage, the wedding chamber or the marriage chamber. It's one of these rituals, and everyone's like, what is this all about? Is this just about sacred hieros gamos, male female marriages, or what is this? And I think that what this is it's the sacrament of that inner unification of the masculine and feminine. So you're both male and female, and you're one at the same time. It's a very deep and great mystery. And I think it's something that we're going in the direction of, again, to truly understand that, so that we can reclaim our full powers as divine humans.
When I met my Lama, and he picked me, either of you, and I know Rosemarie will understand this. There was 300 people, and he was doing a shaking hands down a line. And when he shook hands with me, he stopped, went to like a European handshake with two hands, got up into my face and said, I know you. And my pal, he did the same thing too. And then he leans back to his entourage amongst and said, these two, they hang out together lifetime after lifetime. Nice to see you again. And he toddles off. And when they insist, the monks told, you got to go talk to him at length. He doesn't do that. Okay, fine. I go to talk to him, and he told me a very brief story, and I think you'll appreciate this. And this is how we're going to transition to Rosemarie. He says, in Asia, there are probably 10,000 monks that will never reach enlightenment in this lifetime because they think a female birth is inferior, because the culture teaches them that, and they won't ever embrace their feminine energy.
Wow.
Okay, from the void of the chaos or the force, whatever you want to call it. And then he looks at me and he says, you've mastered it. You've become the blend, and I'm embarrassed, but the bottom line, yeah, I've come to embrace that and understand it. And many times I've had people come up to me, and this because I radiate both, and they will say to me, we think you're confused. You don't know what you are. I said, I know exactly what I am. You don't know what I am. Okay, so I was in Asia. So here we go. We're coming back. Rosemarie, what prompted you to retranslate the Tao Te Ching?
Yeah, it's actually a short story and a very long story. I lived in Asia in the late 70s, and so I learned to read a lot of Chinese. And I've read the Tao Te Ching and various translates over the years. And, I would occasionally come across a phrase or a metaphor that just didn't ring true to me. So what happened basically is in retirement several years ago, it was about 2016 at this point, I said, well, I have the time. Maybe I'll look at the Tao Te Ching and see if I can translate it myself. I know a lot of ancient Chinese, and there are now books that could tell me what the characters I didn't recognize were. And it was a very exciting process. And I did it initially only for my own enjoyment. And then eventually came to the conclusion with all the things I had discovered about the divine feminine Tao, that the nature of the Tao is feminine. I said, I've got to translate this and publish it because this is important for our times.
I would agree. I would agree with you there because I've had in the 7 years of my monastery life, and please understand, I am not a lama. I am not one of these guys. But my lama gave me a great deal of slack. Okay, and I found myself a couple of times in some monastic debates.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things they kept trying to emphasize this. The female rebirth is an inferior birth. It's lower on the karmic ladder. And I went into a nice argument with them. I said, well, Buddha ordained us equally. But the women have, 60 more vows. I said, yeah, they carry the apparatus for reproduction and the responsibility to go along with that. They have a deeper responsibility. And the way this argument went was, I said, in a half an hour, we're going to go outside and there's going to be this beautiful spread of food that the lay people have made out for us. We're going to go out there with our little begging bowls. It looks like a bowling ball, spun aluminum. And we're going to load it up. And all the monks are going to line up at this one table. And the 2 or 3 nuns that are here, we're going to be pushed off to a little dinky card table over here on the side. Now, we're technically equal to you. You just don't recognize the biology. And we've all lived in other realms, other dimensions. We had different biology. We've been all through the universe many lifetimes. And why are you treating the progenitors of life in this world as unequal? Well, the 10th century scriptures, I said, those were written by men. Well, okay, we moved on to other arguments. Later, when we came out for dinner, we got our food. The 3 nuns, the 3 of us were getting ready to sit down. We looked over at the table and the monks were pointing at the empty seats at their table. Okay. And the 2 American Thai nuns were sitting there. Cheryl, we can't do that. And I said, honey, we just climbed Everest, baby. Let's go sit with them, and basically, that's kind of some of the mentality you're dealing with. And for all the beauty you have in Buddhism, all the different traditions of Buddhism, there is still this heavy misogynistic patriarchal view that is not in sync with the divine feminine, which it should be. Okay.
Well,
that's my rant.
And that's certainly right. I mean, many people have translated the Tao Te Ching, and occasionally they'll use the word she as the pronoun. But most of those translators are very traditionally trained scholars in a very masculine tradition, and the tradition has been that the Tao is it. And I saw beyond that, because I looked at the characters in their etymological sense and to what each individual Chinese character was pointing to. And the dark womb, as it's called in poem number 6, for example, this is where creation takes place, in the dark
Thank you.
womb. And the dark womb is a void. It's an immortal void. And out of that dark womb, the hidden womb, comes all of creation. And that's why women are at the center of creation. And cosmologically, women are the you know are the creative force, and the feminine is cosmologically the most creative force, because it will go on and on and on forever, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Marguerite, you had a thought too.
Yeah. First of all, that is so interesting, Cheryl, that you kind of were bridging there, it feels to me, in a very important way. And there is the story that Buddha was born of his mother Maya's side, her, ribs. What I've found is that whenever there are stories like that, it's referencing a divine conception. It's referencing a divine birth. So when there's fuzziness or strangeness or something odd, that is pointing to the fact that Buddha's mother Maya was a divine birth priestess. Just a little side note here.
And of course, Buddha's mother had a very mysterious illness shortly after giving birth to him, and ended up in the God realms. Okay. And first thing he did when he became enlightened was go to the God realms and rescue his mother from there and take her to a Buddha field. See how this comes together. And
it really
look at Eve. They refer to Adam's rib there too.
Well, you see, and that's the reversal story. That's when there's been a hijacking or a redaction or an editing or a distortion, when something is in there that is not biologically, doesn't make sense either biologically, theologically, energetically, or anything. And so that was just a deliberate hijacking of that story of divine birth to make it look like Eve was divinely born of Adam, when actually, if you look at the Gnostic materials, Eve was the first parthenogenetic progenitor of humankind.
Thank you. Okay, this is going to Rosemary first, but I want your thoughts on this as well. Rosemary, when I was looking through the book, I started looking at the calligraphy. Again, I'm talking this 40-year-old Mandarin classes. And I was looking at the calligraphy for Tao, and I see this one stroke down, and I see it repeated, and I'm looking at this and I said, that's almost like the spine of a dragon. Is this a subtle hint to the person's inner soul, or inner dragon, as they say?
Well, the character for Tao, if that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
The character for Tao, it's composed of two radicals or simplified characters. The one you're referring to is a head walking, literally. It means a head. It means a head walking, and then it means walking, and then there's a kind of a square on the side that means head. So it basically, Tao means path in the sense of it's a head walking along. But other people have suggested, particularly Red Pine, who's a translator of the Tao Te Ching that I really admire. He said that we're following the moon. It's walking in path with the moon, which is an interesting idea to me, because that's a much more feminine image than the head itself.
The moon, the moon aspect that you talk about, in witches, we talk about drawing down the moon, so that works very nicely. Marguerite, your thought?
Well, I know nothing about calligraphy or the Tao or anything like that. but I certainly would be a fan of any dragon idea because, just like virgin birth is getting resurrected, I think that dragons, which on some level have never died, especially if, Chinese New Year, you look at the parades and things like that. But yeah, the return of the dragons, the return of our consciousness to the dragons is a very big and important thing for humanity at this time. And that's a whole treatise that I won't I won't go into now.
Yeah, I'd like to
Go
add
ahead.
something because I'm also right now researching a book on mermaids and sea goddesses.
Oh, sweet.
And dragons are a very typical tail end to a mermaid, or it's a serpent that's the tail end to a mermaid. So these images are definitely coming back. And we're so image oriented now that I think there's a chance that we might go, more to our left hemisphere, not so dominant, and go to the right because images are becoming more and more dominant. So we have things like serpents representing the goddess and not being pathologized by the culture now, the way it was in many forms of particularly Abrahamic traditions. Serpents were pathologized, that's all.
Yes, yes, regretfully so. Okay, I'd like to go back to Marguerite for a minute.
It's very obvious.
Okay, there's how do I want to say this? Mary, Mother Mary was not alone in this kind of a practice.
No.
Okay, can we talk about that a minute? Because you talked to the fact that she was part of a lineage, which suggests a tradition.
That's right. So in this gospel, this infancy gospel of James, what it tells us is that Mary had a mother. Her mother's name was Anne, or it would be Hannah in the Hebrew tradition. This is a lineage of Hebrew women. And that Anne was able to have a divine conception of Mary. Okay. And that when Anne is doing this, she invokes her ancestor, Sarah, who is the miraculous mother of Isaac. As we will recall from the Bible, she's the partner of Abraham. And in her elder years, she gives birth to Isaac without a conjugal visit from Abraham. So this is telling us that there is a lineage of these women. If we also look at Rebecca, in the Bible, there are very interesting stories. But getting into this family of Mother Mary, so her mother Anne was a lineage priestess of divine birth, gave birth to her. And then Elizabeth is in that mix. Remember the mother of John the Baptist, who also gives birth to him in her elder years in a miraculous fashion. Well, we find out through the Islamic tradition, in at least one of the texts, that Elizabeth was actually the sister of Anne. And so that's a family affair, women who know how to do this kind of together. And then the final thing I'll say about this is that in this infancy gospel, what it shows us is that Mary is not even alone during the conception ritual. There are 7 other virgins of the temple, of the lineage of David, that are found and that are part of this. And one of them is, again, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth seems to be part of this very same ritual of 8 women that are like, let's say, a spinning wheel. And they must be, each one of them there's a divination where the priest determines what role each one will have by what thread she pulls. And Elizabeth and Mary pull the scarlet thread. And I'm thinking that means they are meant to have the ultimate divine conception. And the other women are there holding energetic space, protective space, supportive space, and so forth. So that this is showing us that oftentimes it was a group type of ritual. And there is some precedent for this in the Greek tradition as well.
Kind of blows a hole into the Christmas myth, doesn't it?
It both verifies what Christianity has been saying all along, but it veers it off over here to, once again, as Rosemarie is doing, put the agency with the feminine, and in this case, put the agency clearly with women as basically the co-creators of Christ consciousness.
Yeah, I can see that. I'd like to go back over to Rosemarie. Now, the Tao Te Ching is 81 poems. Okay, now I read some of them, and as a mystical magician, I was sitting there, I don't want to say laughing or snickering, but I was amused because it was the statements in the poems were so magical and fundamental. You understood Tao is nameless. I'm going to use I don't have the right words in front of me. Is nameless, but is everything. That whole flavor. And I said, these women with this, as Marguerite explained it, seem to be plugged in, hardwired into the universe to be able to channel this energy. I saw this just in the poetry alone. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, first of all, I deliberately translated these poems poetically because I could see in the Chinese that they were meant to be translated poetically. They're basically were stories told about around a campfire before they got written down, or they were sung. I think they're sung lyrics. So each poem is like a condensation of energy and teaching in a very short number of words. And because of the nature of Chinese, the characters in combination within a character, because one character could be made up of many smaller characters, or together in a group of characters, could point to something that is beyond intellectual fathoming. In other words, it's pointing in a way to the moon. It's pointing to something that is a mystery. And so you were right. If you found yourself downloading, if you will, the essence of the poem in a magical way, you were probably doing just the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The one of the other things that caught my attention was, well, as you were saying, how sometimes the calligraphy, the characters kind of get intermixed. Something I learned early on in my college training was that the calligraphies aren't just an alphabet. It actually sort of tells a story.
Right.
And Westerners don't normally know this. And I saw that a lot with the calligraphy that was in this thing. I said, wow, so again, it escapes me as this 40-year-old Mandarin training. So I'm going, oh gosh, how did they do that one? But the bottom line was, I go ahead.
Amazing. Well, it's just amazing. Chinese is an amazing language, particularly the calligraphy. I mean, because it can point to poetic understandings of wisdom that we can't describe in analytic terms, but you can point there, and then people can put their imagination into that and get there too. And that's what the Tao Te Ching does, and that's why it's been, told or read for 4,000 years. I mean, how many things are we going to write that are last 4,000 years? Well, the Tao Te Ching did. And it's still being read, and it's still popular because it condenses knowledge in just an incredible way. And all this, of course, in ancient China, because there were such vast geographical regions, these characters were created to communicate with somebody who spoke a different language of Chinese, but they shared all the same characters. So Chinese is essentially a language that allows to sweep across huge geographical landscapes because it's pictorial. For instance, when I would be sitting, I was in Tokyo and all over Asia in the late 70s, and I'd be looking at a Chinese. I'm reading it, I'm doing it in Chinese, and it's like watching a video because each character is moving.
Yeah.
Each character is moving. You know, it's just an amazing thing to be able to, for a language to do that. English is much more rigid. All Western languages are much more rigid.
Something I'm going to go back to Marguerite here for a moment, but
Sure.
something I noticed, Rosemarie, that as I was reading the poems and where there was calligraphy to talk, and I read the poem, and as I was looking at it, again, the magical mind is looking at this and saying, wow, what they're talking about is turning thought into form, which is what magicians do, and I'm going, wow, they really had their finger on this. How old is this Tao Te Ching?
Oh, at least 3,500 years old. At least.
Wow.
Probably 4,000. I would guess older, because if I look at Chinese history, I know enough about the belief systems, and there was a matriarchal culture prior to the putting down, the writing, the calligraphy that is the Tao Te Ching now. It was written down at about 600 BCE, but the scholars looking at the linguistic structure of the Chinese, the ancient Chinese in the text, say it's at least 1100 BCE.
Wow.
And probably older, because that's as far as they can go back. I mean, it's, translating the Tao Te Ching was the most humbling and joyous thing I've probably ever done, at least professionally.
I found reading through the poetry. I mean, sometimes I can't read the whole book. I have to skim, but this is the thing. I really sat down after supper and read that part, at least the poems, and I kept seeing this. It was like being in monastery again. I was seeing the kind of talk you would hear in a monastery, and I was going, "Wow, this is so cool." Okay, Marguerite. Why has all of this been suppressed? Okay, why have them? I mean, my take on it. I'm going to give you my take. My take is, yes, the cabal of Christianity looks at this stuff and say, yes, the feminine energy is most powerful, but we have to control it. That's my attitude. I'm open to your eyes. Why is all this suppressed? Why is Mary Magdalene painted as a prostitute? She is nothing of that.
Yeah. Well, interesting what Rosemarie said about that. The earlier tradition in China, there are really strong indications that it was matriarchal, meaning matrifocal, meaning the women are at the center, meaning the roles are balanced between men and women, and it's not, a patriarchal horror show. I did a lot of studying of matriarchal cultures all around the world over the past 20 years. And I was part of the matriarchal studies movement and went to those conferences. And there is, in fact, a living matriarchal culture in China called the Mosu, Mosou. So if we go back far enough, cultures are feminine centered and they're feminine based. And at some point, clearly in human history, maybe numbers of different times, but if we hold to the fact that Atlantis is a real part of our history and Lemuria before it and with it is a real part of our history, we're talking about times where things start going wrong because of certain visitations to the planet and controllers that come to the planet. We see these references even in the Bible and so forth, the Nephilim and, all of that sort of thing. So there's something that went down that where things started taking the masculine principle, which is not inherently problematic, but turning it into a problem and hyping it up and turning it into like a warfare mechanism and turning the sword, the phallus into a sword and so forth and so on. And during, the time of when Mother Mary was incarnating as Mother Mary, it was the Roman Empire, which is one of the heights of that kind of patriarchal control cultures and energies. And the institutional church came out of that right on Rome, putting its buildings and its sacred locations right on top of older spiritual sites and so forth. So it's this continuation of the distortion of the masculine principle that has been going on and on and on. And as the male clergy began to take over feminine domains of spirituality and so forth, they began to take over the whole and hijack the entire divine birth priestesshoods and either disappear them or distort them or use them for their own ends and so forth. So by the time we have Christianity and the books of Christianity and the doctrines, it's firmly entrenched with distorted masculine energy. Again, not that there's anything inherently wrong with the masculine, but we're talking a distorted masculine energy. And however, though, they recognize that, as you're saying, Cheryl, the feminine and the womb really as the power. So how do we get this, control it, and then kind of hide it away? Oh, yeah. Let's tell everybody that this virgin, who was a deliberate priestess, knowing what she was doing, was actually a young, innocent maiden who didn't know what was going on at all. And she, one fine day, all of a sudden found out that she was pregnant, and oh, it happened to be Jesus, and oh, it happened to be a divine being. And then let's put Mary over here, never to say anything again until maybe the wedding at Cana, And so, I mean, this is just, the idiot's guide to how patriarchy developed is what, in the last few minutes of what I've been saying. But I think it gets the point across that probably, a lot of us are already familiar with, maybe your listeners are familiar with, but that just puts Mary in a little bit of a context as to why this vital information that, yes, it was a divine birth, yes, this is important, was simply repressed first by the Christian institution and then by science, which declared divine birth a biological impossibility.
Yeah.
That was problem number 2, from which we have not really recovered. And that's why this book is, and the work that I've done on divine birth, the other books that you mentioned, are so startling right now, because it is starting to show us, lift the veil on what women's wombs capacities are, where, how, under what circumstances, and with what intention.
Okay. Rosemarie, did China have this kind of a part, kind of like we had in the West, this kind of patriarchal takeover?
Oh, I'm sure they did, but it was before anything was historically documented.
Okay.
So we don't really know what happened, but you can see elements of the shamanic and matriarchal traditions in the Tao Te Ching. And I think that's why pronoun for Tao, because in Chinese you translate the pronoun given the context. There's no pronoun he, she, like we have it in English or most Western languages. So it's always in terms of the context, and the context is that I discovered and was shocked by, is that the context for describing the Tao are 3 basic words or phrases: mother, virgin, and womb of creation.
Whoa!
Mother, virgin, and womb of creation.
And now all of our conversations work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an astonishing finding. When I realized that, I just said, how could so many years of patriarchal mentality been obscuring this? Now, occasionally I'll find somebody describing the womb, because the womb, the character for womb has been translated in a variety of different ways, but you can't get away from the fact that it is a feminine mystery.
Yeah.
And it's a feminine mystery. It also can be, literally, the character could mean a mare, like the mare of a horse, the breeding mare. And so there's nothing ambiguous about poem number 6, in which it describes the Tao as the dark womb, the dark womb's gate.
Ooh,
Right.
chills.
Dark womb, the gateway to all that is. Yeah. Wow.
Nothing obscure. Right. There's absolutely nothing obscure about it, which is shocking. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it, actually.
Marguerite.
Yeah, and it's like these veils are only coming off now in the 20th and 21st centuries for whatever reason. Like this cosmic turning is happening, and the planet en masse is returning to the understanding of the sacredness of the feminine, the necessity of the feminine, the fact that the feminine has been subverted, suppressed, hijacked, and so forth. And these intrepid scholars like Rosemarie and what you're doing there, this is going on all over the world. Whenever feminine scholars start putting their attention on stuff, you will inevitably find exactly the type of thing that Rosemarie is finding. Go back to Europe. Maria Gimbutas, the great archaeologist, found the same thing. It won't be necessarily in the written record directly, but you'll find it in the myths, the legends, like you're finding in the deep linguistic structure and all that, and in the archaeology. So we can discern this story in the written records of the earth in every country of the world. It's like the same story has happened. Matriarchy, a distorted patriarchy takes over. Distorted patriarchy continues, creates trauma, and now the great awakening of the feminine is happening. So we seem to be in some kind of momentous timing with all of this. And we are all alive at this time where we're having these startling experiences like, oh my God, the Tao is the black womb,
It's not an accident.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What's really interesting about I translate dark womb. Now, womb could mean mare or feminine mystique, or womb. It could mean any one of those three. That character could mean that. What's interesting about the word dark, it's a different character and precedes it. Well, it's above it, literally, because Chinese is written vertically. But the word for dark does not mean sinister or black or foreboding or anything like that. It is literally silk woven around a spindle. And what that means, it's so it's just so beautiful. And what that means is that it is hidden. It's dark in the sense of hidden, and that's why mysterious is sometimes the translation. So it's not like a terrible womb or a dark womb in the sense that it's dark in the sense that like bright darkness. It's the darkness of the moon. It's luminous. So that's how I understand all of that.
That is fascinating.
It's just amazing. I mean, and again, like you said, Marguerite, it's in the Tao Te Ching, the masculine is not degenerated. It's not criticized. But the way it's put in poem 28 is know the masculine, but hold to the feminine.
Yeah.
See the difference here? Know the masculine, know what it is, but hold to the feminine. So the embracing quality of the feminine Tao is what holds everything together.
The anchor, yes.
Wow.
It's the anchor.
And
Marguerite?
Cheryl, I was wondering if I could bring in something here because that relates to Mary's womb. And what I discover is that at the time of her conception ritual with those 7 other virgins, what they are all doing is, guess what? The metaphor is that they are weaving. Okay. And that they were temple weavers. Well, weaving what? Well, things like that silk thread around the spindle that you were just talking about, Rosemarie, like we can plot these things all across. Wow, gather this information.
Marguerite, let's talk about this process.
Yeah.
What was the process that was going on with Mary and these other 7 women?
That's right. Well, they were obviously working in some kind of circle formation, weaving. But what that means is that they're working with weaving light into matter, matter into light. They're working with the light matter DNA interface. And they're working probably with sacred sounding and toning, because I find that there's a reference in the gospel to Mary's use of the songs with the angels and things like that. So this is talking about toning. So they are working with different kinds of, interdimensional substances or processes. And it's a tantra, it's a weaving, I think tantra means weaving or something like that. And it's a bringing in from the cosmos, because Mother Mary is able to unite her womb with that of Mother Divine through these processes and austerities, through this womb, Rosemarie, that you're describing, through the Tao. She's able to unite with it, do this weaving, and as a physical human being, bring into her body in this conception this massive consciousness that we know as Christ consciousness. That is what Sri Kaleshwar said. It was the first incarnation of this being. So she's not recycling anyone. She's not recycling Krishna. She's not recycling Buddha. She's not recycling, she's just massively bringing this in through all of her high level technologies, which is why we can understand it took her a million lifetimes, to be able to do this. Okay. And she's working with this archangelic presence, whom we are told is Gabriel, right? But these are these support beings in this process for her to eventually have this light conception. Ding, her egg is fertilized. And now it's beginning the process of the life cycle of the egg within her womb, but it's containing this tremendous consciousness through these processes that she and these women have been doing. And I just love how it's the spindle with the thread.
Yeah.
I mean, God, if I had known that, I would have quoted you. I think we're going to have a revised edition.
No, that's funny. The other thing that's really important in poem number 6 is that what is she's weaving is not thread in what we usually think of thread. It's a gossamer. In other words, that's what is being woven.
Yes, and that's how Mary was weaving Jesus. It was a gossamer. It's an energetic plasma, right, essentially.
And magical practitioners frequently do in their magic, depending upon the complexity of what they're trying to manifest, weaving.
There we go. There we go. So it's all recognizable as something that's possible and doable with the right level of expertise, consciousness, and integrity and humility that Mary had.
An example, something we were talking about a few minutes ago, an example of how some traditions, like we'll say in Buddhist monastic tradition, are finding ways to work with this. The last 2 or 3 years that I was in monastic life, I lived with Burmese monks, Theravada monks versus Orthodox Tibetan. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they looked at my androgyny and began to, when we would go to somebody's house to do a house blessing or chase out the evil spirits, whatever weekend duties they had for us when I wasn't in my corporate job. Okay. Remember, I went to work every day at Lockheed Martin dressed like the Dalai Lama. Okay. So there were 2 of us. Statistically, of the 125 people in IT, in corporate security, the 2 Buddhist nuns statistically were taking over security at Lockheed, which is kind of funny. But the point that got brought up was we would be introduced, and this is the lead Vedic was saying, or venerable, I should say, was saying, this is brother so-and-so, this is brother so-and-so, and this is, my Buddhist name is Tashi. This is Tashi. She is our brother. Okay. and that is how they managed to do it. Now, I'm
Wow.
also ordained in Tibetan Orthodox tradition. Buddhism in Tibetan Orthodox has two tracks. One is the traditional Buddhist sutric track, but because the Buddhist training was brought to the shamans in Tibet originally by Pedmansamvava, there's a second track in Orthodox Tibetan Buddhism where they, instead of wearing the burgundy and yellow, they wear burgundy and white. And they can grow long hair, they can be married, but they're some people Western tend to think of them as lay monks. They're not. They're their own thing. But the bottom line is they're referred to as nakpon. A man could be called a nakpa, and a woman could be called a nakma, so to speak. But most people just refer to them as nakpon because they're this shamanic other thing, and they're not really male, not really female, but a little of everything. So
Yes.
that's kind of how they look at it, and I hold that ordination as well. So it's
Wow.
this is extremely interesting. I've got to ask a question, Marguerite. What does this blossoming we're seeing right now? Okay, what does this mean to women in the world broadly?
Yeah. Well, we've seen this over the past 30 years around Mary Magdalene, right? This
Okay.
material has exploded about that Mary Magdalene wasn't a prostitute, or if she was working Tantra, it's a whole different thing than, what has been portrayed. And so now with this work on Mary, we're starting to have the opening to Mother Mary that, over the next 30, 40 years, whatever, people are going to be like, wow, who is Mother Mary? I mean, there are so many ramifications of this for women and for everyone about Mother Mary, because it's not only just about her capacity for divine birth, which is remarkable enough, but it's who she was as a being that I've been teaching about and will continue to write about, that are in some other suppressed biographies of her, that she was not this passive little girl who disappears, in the Gospels. She had a life. She had a ministry after Jesus. She was a healer. She was an exorcist. She did masses. She was revered, highly revered. She sent all of these people out to do teachings and come back to her once a year. She had an ascension ceremony for her death, such that she went into full goddesshood. She's a model. So she's a role model for our own spiritual deepening and ascension, or ascension, or spiritual awakening, moving into these deeper levels of consciousness as planet Earth rebirths itself, explodes, moves into a new consciousness. So there's tremendous implications, value, and medicine in understanding Mary. And just if we look at the womb aspect of it, what is coming along with this understanding of Mother Mary is that there is a whole teaching called, what I call the Holy Womb Chakra teachings, which were hidden away in ancient palm leaf manuscripts, largely sequestered in India, but that Sri Kaleshwar, this Hindu saint, who also had past life recall of being with the Holy Family, gathered or received synchronistically and mined for all of the information, the mantras and the yantras, the drawings of the Holy Womb teachings. This is stuff that's been suppressed for thousands of years. And he said it's part of what Mother Mary used in her practices. These mantras, these yantras, these understandings, these are now available to people. I've been trained in this practice. I'm training other people in this practice. It's spreading. And so I have seen the direct ramifications on my own womb and my own life of doing these practices, clearing the womb and empowering it for magical purposes, not just divine birth, but other things as well. And part of those practices involve having a divine conception through regular sexual union with a man. A woman and a man can use a 2 mantra sequence to do this and conceive a higher than ordinary type of child. The ramifications of that alone are huge. I mean, if all women and men started conceiving in that way, we would be up leveling the whole, humanity. we would be doing tremendous amounts of healing for humanity. We would be working in harmony with the earth once again. We would be connecting back up with the unseen realms. So this is this is the trajectory of what's possible when we start understanding, digging into this and going deeper of Mary herself.
A problem we have here in the West. We used to do a prayer shift at my primary monastery that I was at. And it was basically about a 4-hour thing. And I used to sign up for like 3 in a row, 3-4 hours in a row on Saturday night, because you're monastic, you're celibate, and you can't drink. So, what better to do on Saturday nights, they say. There used to be some couples that would come over to the temple, and they'd give themselves a date. And we're talking married couples. They'd go out and proverbial date, get a babysitter, that type of thing, and then come over and walk through the temple, maybe even sit down and do a little meditation or chant some prayers together. Okay. And I talked to one particular couple a couple of times, and one time they brought their 4-year-old son with them, and who they told me was very shy. Okay, don't be put off by him when we bring him. I said, okay, fine. And remember, I'm in my robes, buzz cut, the whole thing. And they brought him over, and the first thing this very shy kid did was run across the foyer of the front area of the monastery and literally leap up into my arms.
Oh.
Okay. And I looked at his parents and said, why don't you go into prayer room and look at some new art we have in here? Me and your son are going to go for a walk. And I went back into one of the other temple spaces, and we're walking along, and there's all these Tonka pictures of big snarly type protectors, right? Well, I didn't say that they were protectors. We're walking along, and he's pointing at them. He says, they're really not evil. They just want to scare you, and they'll protect you, And this little 4-year-old kid is telling me this. So he's clearly a tuku. Right. In my head. Tuku, for the audience, means an ascended master coming back into another human form. Okay. Yeah. And I took the parents aside very quietly and said, can I recommend that you bring him in to see my teacher? This guy's the head of Orthodox Tibetan Buddhism North America. I said, he'll be here in about 2 months. Would you come in and see him with your son? And the mother looked at me. I said, he's something special, isn't he? And I said, yes. Well, we've thought that ourselves. I said, okay, we're not going to bring him in to see your teacher. Why? We don't that kind of life for him. So in a lot of situations here in the West, there's couples that are literally dumbing it down. They don't want their kid to be this ascended master.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And it's a shame, but so hopefully they're born someplace else where it will be a little bit more accepted. But here in the West, it gets these. Hell, I used to see mothers not want their son, who actually had a vocation in the Catholic Church. I was raised Catholic till I was 17, and I saw the fallacy in what the fairy tales they were teaching, and I said, no, I can't stay here. Okay. But I saw they were saying, oh, we're not getting the vocations we used to. And I'm saying, yeah, you are. It's just you got all the mothers in the parish talking their sons out of it. So there's some problems we're having here in the West. And one of my teachers a long time ago said, even bringing Buddhism to the West was like trying to get a lotus flower to grow on a rock. We have some problems here. But I guess that I'd like to go back up to Rosemary with what you just said. Do you see this evolution? I mean, have you been back to Asia since you translated? And do you see any kind of evolution going on there within the feminine community? Now, when I come back from that, ask me about matriarchy. I've met a matriarchal culture a number of years ago, and it fascinated me. But go ahead, Rosemary.
Well, I've been back to China, but China right now is going through so many technological changes that it's very hard to get a grasp on what's happening with the culture, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. What I do know is that my Chinese American friends are changing.
Okay.
They're changing. They are probably more in tune with the way Western culture is framing the divine feminine. Of course, a lot of my friends are transpersonal psychologists. What can I say? I have an unusual group of friends, but even when I'm in a traditional Bible study in the church, I attend a traditional Bible study, and I start talking about the divine feminine, how women all throughout the Near East and the Fertile Crescent lost their status over and over and over again throughout the entire Near East. People are more responsive. I see change. I'm old enough now, I'm 74. I'm old enough now to see that the way people respond to my weird ideas has changed radically. It's very reassuring that we are returning to a more egalitarian way of looking at the genders. That's all. I mean, what else can I say?
Yeah.
When I lived in Washington, D.C., it's an international city. Okay. And I had the opportunity to befriend through a friend of mine introduced me to some people who worked at the Ethiopian embassy. It was during their civil war there at that time, 88, 89 time frame. And one of the diplomatic people there had his mother flown over here to the United States for certain medical care on some problem with some bone problems in her legs, right? So she was here, and her and I hit it off. And we would go for long walks, her arm wrapped around mine, and we would go for long walks, and she would tell me her English was impeccable. And what threw me a curve when she had two other children who were working in the she had a total of 3 children working at the embassy. And she started to tell me one day over a bunch of Ethiopian food we were eating in a restaurant, and she told me she had 13 children. I was impressed. And I said, wow, a lot of work for the father. She says, no. She says, there are 12 different dads. He says, I own all the property in our culture. Oh, really? And she says, yes, I pick and choose who's the father of my children.
Queen of Sheba.
Queen of Sheba. Okay. And I said, well, you said you had, 12 different fathers. You've got 13 kids. Oh, your friend Whoopi Shot. And I said, yeah, I hang out with Whoopi Shot. I said, he came from someplace else. That's how she gestured. Yeah. Took me years to understand that, but boy, when I did, it was like a bomb went off on my head.
You see, so this stuff is in cultures, yeah. And even oh God, there was this researcher in, I think, Melanesia or something like that, who talked about that the people there said that there were various ways that children are conceived. And I don't think they even believed in like sperm and egg unification or something like that. And therefore pregnancies would and would not result because of their beliefs, right? So I think there are a variety of understandings that then the human female womb comes into alignment with. And these hidden stories about divine conception are all over the place.
In another part of my life, I'm a UFO statistician. I've written books counting the numbers. Okay. But in the course of doing research for presentations, you run across an awful lot of medieval art. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I know.
I know where you're going. Historian art, right? I mean,
two pieces of it. One piece of medieval art that always fascinated me was that whatever the medieval church was teaching, when the cathedrals got built, they were half the time named for Mary, and there were paintings of Mary, Queen of the Heavens, stars over her, like she was just floating there in the universe, and going, whoa, what is that telling you? And the other ones was when you looked at these paintings that show her in conception, and these medieval artists were showing like what people are trying to tell us are a flying saucer, but there's this beam coming from someplace else. Yeah. And so it was the whole theme of it was, and I had to say it this way in one presentation I gave, I had about 6 pieces of this kind of art. And I said, guys, they're telling us that this kid is not from around here, you
Yeah.
know, and was given to us some other way here. And this is an excellent explanation to the whole works.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that? And then we'll go to Rosemary.
Yeah. I think that a lot of these ancient or medieval, let's say, painters and Renaissance painters got the concept either directly or unconsciously, where they would be showing the light conception, the light literally coming in the window and into Mary's womb, or the sound. They would sometimes have the conceptions be through the sound, and so that is intuiting. If they did not have direct connection already with this suppressed gospel, which has been around for hundreds of years, intuiting or knowing some of these technologies. And we can call the archangels ETs, right? We can call so many of these interdimensional beings ETs.
Yeah.
It's like what separates out an ET from a master, right? These are all beings that are on some other dimensional plane. And I think it's a matter of what dimensional plane are they on? Is this a plane of integrity? Is this a being of integrity? Is this working for the love and the light, or is this working for negativity and so forth? So I think a lot of dots are being connected now as we converge the whole UFO disclosure with these ancient stories and begin to re-understand what actually has been going on and is going on now.
There's a very large, well, I shouldn't call it large. There's a significant piece of the UFO community that has got to the point of we the nickname we call it is woo woo, but gotten to the point of seeing the metaphysical overtones of what UFO is. It isn't just about this hardware and somebody getting into somebody's cockpit. There's
No.
something bigger going on.
Yes.
And the fact that you've got groups like they call the CE5 group that sits out there in a field and meditates and calls them in, and that type of thing. And it's in fact, that's half how I got this program. I was on a program on this network talking about UFOs. In the last half hour of it, the producer realized I had the metaphysical side of it, and we got into a deep conversation about that.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal. And one of the things that came out of some of that talk, and I think this has bearing, there was a study done for the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation, and they interviewed about 3,500 people who had been touched by ET. Okay. And the guy who was the senior author on the thing, Ray Hernandez, gets up there and he says, we're at a conference, and he says, hey, I know agnostics to get touched by ET, they come back spiritual. I know dyed-in-the-wool Bible thumpers, they get abducted by ET, they come back spiritual. He says, ET's trying to turn us all into mystics.
I know.
Okay. So we're getting some help from out of the neighborhood, so to speak, with all of this right now.
Yes. And when I talk about divine birth in public, sometimes people will raise their hand and they'll bring up the whole concept of, is this related to ET abduction and things like that? And I say, yes, it's on a spectrum with all of that. Anytime that a female womb is used or misused, it's all on this spectrum of conception, from divine birth and tantra, all the way to whatever these so-called abductions are being used for, which is always to get the biological material, namely the sperm and the eggs from people. So this is all about an awakening now to what's really going on, what has been going on, why has this veil been pulled over all of this, and now that it's starting to come off, discerning through all of these stories and figuring out what do we do with this and where do we go from here. And I think it ultimately, if you stick with the idea of women's womb empowerment, you will not go wrong, basically.
Rosemary, I have a question. As I read through the poem, 81 poems,
right?
Why did they sound like? And I'm saying this one for the benefit of our producer, who's a music producer too. Why did they read like something from Bob Dylan?
Yeah, no, they do. They do really sound like song lyrics, and they were meant to be popular. The Tao Te Ching was meant to be sung, I think, to be sung in small circles, probably gathered around a fire at night, and then gradually. But literally, they were meant to be lyrics, and they allude to wisdoms that are beyond description. So you have to use lyrical or poetic language to do it. The musicality of the way I've translated it also lends one to looking at literally forward. You look forward because you're singing, not just talking. That's a really important area, and Chinese scholars, English Chinese scholars, have not translated the Tao Te Ching poetically, far less lyrically and like music.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's another part of this translation that is profoundly feminine. You're actually weaving a song. You're creating a song, and song after song after song points to the ineffable wisdoms of the cosmos, which
Music
are
will communicate when nothing else will. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that will outlast any of us, human beings or animals or whatever. The Tao will go on, and the Tao is feminine.
Let me ask a last question. This has been powerful talk here, and I'm going to have you both back individually at some point. This is great stuff. Okay, Marguerite, your last thoughts on Magdalene energy, because it's been the last 20 years I've heard her name used more than I ever heard it in Catholic school. Okay, your thoughts there, and what does your book mean to like the future of Christianity, Judaism,
Right.
and maybe even to some degree to Islamic tradition, because up to a certain point they're almost parallel.
Yeah, because Mary is mentioned more in the Quran than she is in the New Testament.
Yes.
And her parents are mentioned in the Quran as being very high holy beings. So, oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yes, Joachim, and he's called Imran or Imram.
Heard that. Okay.
And, yeah, and so Magdalene represents the journey that is open to every woman, the journey of ascension or inscension or awakening that's open to every woman. She's identifiable. She's we understand her as sexual. She is somebody who was learning from Jesus and Mary and Mother Mary. We hear about that not only in the New Testament, but in the Gnostic Gospels. She was privy to special teachings. And what I discovered through my research on Mother Mary was that Mother Mary was her mentor and her guide, as well as potentially her mother-in-law, assuming that these stories about Jesus and
the
Mary
Grail, yes, agreed,
were true, that they were partners, And so both of these women, I think Mother Mary will become more accessible as I roll out my work on Mother Mary. And we understand her as a woman who went total rainbow body. And Mary Magdalene is really more somebody who's in process of that, as are we all. So she's a little bit closer to us. She's a little more understandable, a little more of our friend, our sister, right? And then you had another question about, the future of Christianity and
Judaism.
I mean, all religions should always be evolving, right? Otherwise, they're simply just control programs.
Yes, they should be living.
So
agreed.
They should be living. And so this is breathing a new life into these religions, in the sense that we can look, as Rosemarie is doing with the Tao, we can look at the feminine aspect that has been suppressed, and what is the medicine there for us, and how do we want to change these religions to either embrace this material or even evolve them so that they look, something completely other. As we release the patriarchal programming, the control mechanisms, and the dogmas and things like that have been used to control people for thousands of years. So, I mean, it's really up to whatever people decide to do with this information. I think there's a potential over the next 30 years for this to go viral and people to really say, like the Mary Magdalene material has, and for people's lives to literally change as people's lives have changed, incorporating the Magdalene material. And then after that, who knows? I mean, maybe the mystery tradition of miraculous conception will be around 4,000 years from now. Rosemarie. But by that time, hopefully it will, we don't even need that book anymore, because people will have so incorporated this and transformed themselves and the whole idea of religion based on
maybe
this.
women priests. It would save the Catholic Church.
Well, you know,
in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a whole big story, because, you know, it's like, do you even want women to go into a patriarchal structure, right? So, you know, there's just big debates that could go on about that, but that's how I will conclude here.
Okay. Rosemarie, the Chinese people have had the Tao Te Ching for over 5,000 years. Now, through your translations, Westerners can have it. What is your vision? What would you like to see your book do?
I would like to see it change the way we think about the cosmological force behind creation.
Ooh,
the
like
cosmological force behind creation is feminine.
Yeah.
And if we could get our psyches around that reality, that would change everything. The cosmological force behind creation is feminine.
Yep.
It is a dark womb.
Yep.
And if my book translation has any authority and people read it, it's selling well. I'm glad for that. But if it has a force, that's what I'd like it to do, to open people's psyche to the possibility that creation is fundamentally feminine. It is not masculine as we've described it. If there's a certain amount of parthenogenesis, but going on, but the force behind creation is feminine. It's like giving birth.
Yep.
Gravity wins. You go.
Thank you.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And
thank you.
This is a point that I for 30 years and 40 years and 300 students, I have had to struggle to get this knocked into their heads. Trust me. The women got it. But okay. Hey, I have been talking with Marguerite Mary Rigoglioso. I dropped it. Sorry. And Rosemarie Anderson. Now, let's get the books up there, John. Okay, the first book is The Mystery Tradition of the Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births. Look at that uterus and those two nice ovaries, one showing the dark energy there. I love it. This book is being published by the Bear Company out of Rochester, Vermont, bearcompanybooks.com, all one word. And you can get it on Amazon, and I recommend it. It's a wonderful book. When I can sit down and read the whole thing, I will. But what I have read of this book, it's brilliant. The next book is The Divine Feminine, Tao Te Ching by Rosemarie Anderson. And both ladies, by the way, are PhDs. Please know that. It's got fantastic allocates and blurbs on the back. And again, it's published by, and I got to verify this, it's published by Inner Traditions in Rochester, Vermont. They're very, very helpful publisher to this program, Mystical Mentors. And I have had a blast talking with you two ladies. This has been the most fulfilling chat I've had. Remember I told you in the letter I sent you, my show is like a nice chat in a cafe, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. And I have had a blast. I'll tell you, this has been fun.
It's been great.
Thank you very much for being on the program. We will have you back in the future, and we'll go into this stuff in deep depth. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Johnny, I want to talk magic with our audience. Ladies, you can hit your little, leave the studio.
All righty.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Okay. There's a
And
button
sorry,
down.
I will
Nope.
leave.
Okay, no problem. Well, you can stay if you want to
Bye-bye.
listen. You can stay if
Enjoy.
you want to listen. You're
Happy
welcome.
to put.
Okay. All right. That was a wonderful 90
Wasn't that
minutes.
good? That was
You like
amazing, right?
that? Okay. Now we're going to talk about magic. Those of you who have multi-section notebooks, like I ask you to get, make a couple of notes. Johnny, throw the first book up, Mr. Tradition.
Yeah.
Now, you may not immediately need to have a book like this in your collection, but down the road, you may say, "Oh my gosh, what was that book Cheryl showed us 6 months ago or a year ago?" Okay, this is the book. You write this down. Write down the name of the author. Write down the name of the book. Write that in the back of your book. Okay. And this is important because this is a concept that, as you could hear from the teachers we just had in this program, it's you're in a wonderful age. It is blossoming. It is blossoming like a huge sunflower right now. This whole concept of the feminine energy. This is critically important for you to understand if you're going to move forward with magic. That whole idea of the dark womb. If we're talking to the universe, we're talking to the force, we're talking to the ultimate dark womb. And this is where magic is manifested through the energy of the force. Okay, John, let's put the other title up. Okay, Divine Feminine, Tao Te Ching. I read the poems in here, these 81 poems. It was one of the most mystical experiences I've had in months. Okay. I just got done writing a book of magic. Okay. Don't go to that one yet. And I just got done writing this book, just got published about a week or so ago. And then I while preparing for this show, I sat here and read these poems. And believe me, there, you can see it there. Okay, there's some fantastic 5,000-year-old Chinese poems translated to English, and it explains this whole divine feminine and the viewpoint, and it's subtle, and it reads, one, it reads like Zen, for one. Two, it reads like if you're in magic a long time, it resonates with you because you say, yeah, that's how it is. There's a great line in this. Let me quote that line again from her bio. Okay. To act without acting. Do without doing. Now, what does that mean? How can you act without acting? Think of it like this. Instead of thinking about sitting here with your felt tip marker and making a stroke on the page, you just do it. You don't think about it. You just do it. Sounds like a Nike logo, doesn't it? Just do it. Yeah. There's a lot of communication coming through in that sales pitch. Okay, just do it. And then the other part of that line was, let me open the book again here. The other part of the line is do without doing. Okay. Now, sometimes do without doing doesn't mean actually doing it in physical form, but just doing it in a manifestation context. Think about it, visualize it. And in magic, visualization is everything. Okay. Go to the first empty chapter in your book. All right. There are three aspects to us as humans. Okay. This is the magic lessons. Okay. So pay very close attention to this. We, the meat sock, okay, the meat sock, this is the talking self. I think, therefore I am. Okay. That whole idea that we are everything. But we carry an eternal spark of life within us. Okay. Now, Western culture tends to think that, oh, heaven's out there someplace. The great beyond's out there someplace. No. If you read Coptic tradition, they will say the kingdom of heaven is within. Okay. Now, what's our spark? Our creative spark is not separate from the universe. It didn't get dumped down us like an M&M down our throat and it's in there. No. We are still connected to everything, everywhere, every when. Everything in all the multiverses, all those trillions of galaxies that are out there. Okay? We're connected to everything. Now, does that mean we can reach out and touch them real easy? Somebody asked me the question recently, hey, the aliens on Zeta Reticuli 39 light years from here, can I reach out and touch them? In theory, yes. In theory, yes. But you're going to have to do a lot of work to get yourself in the state of mind that magic and touching that alien on that far away plane or far away planet or galaxy or whatever, you're going to have to do it. But you know something, you're probably already doing it now. We all have some we have our regular mundane dreams, getting into a dream and finding ourselves on stage naked. We've all had dreams like that. We all have dreams about what we do at work and, how bad the boss we hate bugs us in our dream, makes us wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, that type of thing. Have you ever noticed that the dreams really get nasty or ridiculous just before you wake up? Yeah. Funny how it works like that. But let's talk about the talking self and that little spark of our divine is called the younger self. So we got the talking self and we have the younger self. The younger self, because it's connected to the great force. I like Star Wars, the force. And now we know from this program, the force is feminine. The cosmic force is feminine. Okay? To do divining. Now, some of you have done New Age reading. You know about the Akashic records, okay? That all the knowledge in the universe has been acquired by all the living beings forever is stored in the great consciousness. Okay? That's how this works. Stored in the great consciousness. Okay. In order to touch any of that information, you have to communicate to the younger self. Do you ask it? Do you write out a little spell, a little piece of paper and say, I want to know about the next week's lottery numbers? Problem is, the younger self does not understand verbal words. The younger self does not understand verbal words. Write this down. Quote me. Younger self does not understand verbal words. So to communicate to the younger self, it's a functionality of communicating with, that's why we dance. That's why we drum in pagan community. That's why we print pretty pictures. That's why we have things like tarot cards, pictures, music, okay? Communicating to the younger self in a ritual, we'll say, is a game of what I call magical charades. That type of thing. Okay? It's a game of magical charades. You're trying to impress upon the younger self something in a non-verbal way. And this is the toughest part to learning magic. Now, traditionally in magic, most people start out with spell casting. Okay? And in my new book, and we'll show a picture of it in a few minutes, not right now. In my book, I take after 44 years of experience in the pagan community, the Wicca community, a whole bunch of sub-traditions, okay, and learning magic, okay, and I spent, 7 years in a Buddhist monastery, and I learned their view of touching the force, okay. The trick with this is anything that you want to know from the great consciousness, the younger self has to communicate it because it's what's connected, not your talking self. And if you want to manifest something, okay, something magical, and I'm not telling I hear people all the time. Students used to come to me, I want a new surfboard. I want a new bicycle. Magic is not a vending machine. Okay, and if you spend all your time trying to satisfy your material gains, you're going to be sadly disappointed. Oh, you might get some of the stuff, but there's sort of a payback. You got to be kind of careful there. We'll get into that on another show. It's not bad, but it's not great. Okay. So a lot of people traditionally in magic, and me too, we were taught a little spell casting initially. And to be honest with you, it's ass backwards to what we should be doing. Okay? Casting spells, you should know what you're doing before you try to do it. And in order to be connected to the universe to do it, connected to the force to do it, you have to establish a relationship with your younger self. Okay? And I'll give you an example. I'll pull something down here. Velcro. Gotta love it. Okay, here we go. Okay. Tarot cards. Okay. Just happen to have my handy deck, the Robin Wood deck. Recommend it strongly. Okay. There's all these pretty pictures in the tarot cards. Okay. There's more. Okay. There's more. Now, all these pretty pictures, there's technical meanings for all of those cards. Okay. And I tell my students that if they're going to learn tarot, you don't have to do magic, but if you're going to learn tarot, I recommend that you spend some time developing your relationship with your younger self from a nonverbal pictorial standpoint. So I hear people all the time say, well, I've got 35 tarot decks and I use them all. Well, okay, that's a good technical reader. But if you're going to be an intuitive reader, I recommend you work with one deck. This Robin Wood deck is something I've been using since 1989. Not this particular deck. I keep about 5 factory wrap copies of it in my closet, my witch's closet. So when this one wears out, I put another one in. But I've used the same deck for over 30 years. Okay? Because once I establish a good relationship with my younger self, the intuitive signals that come off the cards to me sometimes don't even jive with the technical reading of the card, but they tell me something I need to know, especially if I'm doing a reading for somebody, okay, at a charity event or something like that, okay? So, once you've developed this relationship with what I call divining, you can do it with tarot cards. You can do it if you're a little bit more modern person and you learn how to do remote viewing. There's plenty of books out there about the military style remote viewing. You still have to quiet yourself because our Western minds have this nasty chatter. In Buddhism, we used to call it monkey chatter, Western mind. Okay? Monkey chatter, Western mind. There's always something going on in it. Okay. And one of the things we need to do, this is a shortcut. I know people go out there and buy 200 books on magic because they think one of those books will have a shortcut. The shortcut is, and I'm telling you this, the shortcut is, and it isn't one particular tradition's got something over the other. I study Gardnerian. I'm ordained in Alexandrian. I've got Egyptian training. I've got Native American training. I've got Buddhist training. I've got Buddhist shaman training. Nobody has a shortcut. The shortcut is in the method. Quote, the shortcut, can't talk now. Been talking for 2 hours. The shortcut is in the quiet. You have to learn to quiet your mind. Now, people say, well, I can do that and close my eyes, meditate. No. Here's my assignment for you. And take this down. I want you to spend 2 minutes a day, every day, meditating for the next 3 months. Now, 2 minutes doesn't sound like much. And I know there are people out there who say, well, I've already been meditating. I can do 25 minutes. No. You closed your eyes, but did you sit there and think about what you were going to do after you're done meditating? Did you think about the basketball game? Did you think about that new song you heard on your feed, whatever feed you've got? No. This is about quieting your mind. And I guarantee you, in the first 2 minutes of your thing, and you can set up I've got a little kitchen timer. $3-4 kitchen timer, and I set 2 minutes on the thing and I set it down, and in 2 minutes when it beeps off, I'm done. I keep a journal. I write down everything that happened in that session. Now, some of you are going to start doing this in earnest, and all this crap is going to start coming up in your consciousness. It happens to everybody. Your boss yelling at you comes up, your mother yelling at you, your brothers and sisters barking at you. Anything that's under your skin and is rattling around in your subconscious, okay, is going to start coming up. It's like a ghost image. My daughter, when she first started embracing meditation as an adult, called me up and says, Cheryl, it just keeps all this crap. I said, yeah, you have to let it go. Work through it. Let it pass through you like a ghost. Let it pass through you like a ghost. Okay? That's all you have to do. And people will come back to me. I guarantee you, you'll come back to me in a month and you'll get here in the chat session and say, it was too hard. Oh, come on. You're better than that. You really are. You're better than that. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. 2 minutes. It's a vacation. Treat yourself to it. And gradually, as the crap goes away, I mean, I've been meditating now for 20 years. Do I meditate for hours and hours in a temple someplace? No. I do 5 minutes in the morning on a stool. I do it again at lunchtime, and I do it again a little after supper. Sometimes I do it in the loo, on the throne. Okay? Yeah, you can do it anywhere. In fact, people tell me, oh, I'm too busy. I don't have time to meditate. If you have to, set your timer on your bloody phone, set it in your pocket, and sit there with your eyes closed and relax and let go. Be alone with your thoughts for 2 minutes. Don't buzz it ahead to 3 minutes. This is not a game. Who gets to 10 minutes is going to win. Everybody does it. Some people master it in a month. Some people master it in 6 months. 2 minutes is all I'm asking. 2 minutes a day, every day. And if you come back to me in the chat room in 3 weeks and say, well, I haven't been doing it exactly every day, then why are you studying magic? If you aren't willing to do the preparatory stuff to learn how to quiet your mind enough so that you can either divine and get information from the universe, and some of the best stuff I've learned about practicing magic, I didn't get out of a book. I got it from the Force. Okay? And some of my students got it from the Force because I showed them how to do it. Okay? If you listen every week, I'll give you a little lesson every week. But this is the one thing I'm going to harp on. You've got to quiet your mind. Now, basic. We get you up to 10 minutes. You will have enough quietness and settledness to do divining, maybe remote viewing. It's a structured form of divining. Or maybe do a little bit of manifestation. Okay? I'll teach you how to do manifestation. Now, a lot of people, a lot of witches, they get these little bottles, and they write down a wish on a piece of paper and they stuff it in the little bottles with some herbs and all this stuff. Yeah, fine. What those herbs are about is they're supposed to help generate some kind of an image in your head. Okay? The herbs themselves have no magical ability. That little piece of paper with that little one-liner wish in there has no magical ability whatsoever. In fact, remember I said the younger self doesn't understand what you wrote on the thing because it doesn't understand the language. But the reason we put things like that, these herbs and spices and incense and candles, why do people use candles? Candles, you can focus on it. But we're not living in the 16th, 17th, 18th, or 19th century. We don't really have to use a candle to meditate on the flame. You can meditate without that flame. And as a former fire rescue person, I'd rather you don't play with candles. Okay? I really would. You don't know how many fires we've put out because somebody left their candle going in on their altar, or put a whole bunch of the little tea light candles on the thing. And guess what? They liquefy and suddenly they reach a point where they're evaporating enough and they go, boom! And there goes your altar. There goes your bedroom. Okay? Trust me. Don't monkey with the candles. You don't need crystals. Crystals are a fad. Okay? You don't need crystals. Oh, I hear mail from people every day. Oh, Cheryl, how do I charge my crystals in the moonlight? Throw them away. Okay. I don't believe in using crystals. Do I have a magic wand? Yes, I do. Do I use it every time I do manifestation? No. I use it as a theater prop. And most things we use in witchcraft are theater props to help us. Give you an example. Do I run around in my witchy robes all the time? No. But if I'm out doing a ceremony with a bunch of people, when you put that robe on, it's a psychological cue to your subconscious. Now it's time to do magic. And my cue only happens when I put the hood up. Okay? Now it's time to do magic. Same thing if you want to work with my students for 25 years did one thing. I taught them their first magic spell the first night. And I gave them the recipe for a little loaf of white bread. A tenth of the class, 50, 60 people sitting there in the presentation, get up and walk out muttering, "That's not real magic." Baby, it quiets your mind. Sitting there massaging dough and kneading the dough relaxes you. It's very zen. Okay. And by the way, when you're done baking the bread, you can eat it. It's really good. Trust me, magical bread is tasty, provided you follow the directions. Now, another people say, well, if we're going to do all this stuff with thought, why do we have to bake the bread? Well, the reason you have to bake the bread is someday in the craft, you may want to work with potions and tinctures. Okay. And the measurement, this is like a chemistry class. The measurement of things, essential oils and all kinds of stuff like that is critical. You just can't pour a bunch of stuff together. It's got to be measured. You got to do it a certain way. Teaching bread kind of prepares you for that sort of discipline. Okay. So all my students learn to bake bread. Okay. And in the back, the last chapter in my book that we're going to show you a copy of in a couple of minutes here, you can order it on Amazon. You British folks, it's about 12 bob to get it. In America, no, it's about 10 bob to get it. And in America, it's about $12.99. But the bottom line is I didn't price the book to make money. Believe me, we priced it pretty cheap. The deal is I went in there. The name of the book is Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch. I didn't follow everybody else's practice. In fact, had I followed the practices of like one of the 7 covens that invited me to join and then decided I was too much of a wild duck to be with them, because covens are more the exception than the rule. Most witches are solitary practitioners. Okay? Most witches are solitary practitioners. In fact, we all are. Even if we're a member of a circle, even if we're a member of a coven, even if we're a member of a clan of covens. Okay, we're still individually solitary practitioners. So you get this whole situation with, well, should I go in a coven? You think the coven's going to teach you? No, they usually only induct people who've already shown that they know how to do this stuff. And a coven typically is, and I like to call it like a Marine drill team. They're very organized. They're very precise. They try to function as one mind, focused on the point of what the objectives of the coven are. So you don't look to find a coven to have somebody educate you. There's some really good books out there. Anything by Silver Ravenwolf is excellent. Good buddy of mine. I've known her for 30 years. In fact, she wrote a very nice thing on my book. She was surprised I finally got around to writing one. When an elder priest or priestess retires, which I retired a year ago, December, they are expected to write a book of their take on things. Some of them write about how to organize a group of people. Some of them write their best spells, whole book of best spells. Okay. Some of them write about just like a memoir of their life in the craft. Okay. So there are those kinds of books out there. There's a lot of crap out there. Trust me, there's a lot of crap out there. And the first thing you don't want to do is go down to your local bookstore, or especially if it's a chain store, and go into the witchcraft books and start buying up all the spell books. Okay. Here's why. 1, I told you need to be quiet, learn how to quiet your mind. That's point 1. Point 2, the spells that are in there probably won't work for you. Okay. I'll tell you why. Because the stuff that was used to write that spell was designed by the person who wanted to work it to give them certain visualizations in their head, certain visualizations to help them communicate to that younger self who's going to talk to the Force. Okay, this is how this works. Magic is not hard, but it's not easy either. It does take work, and it is not like Harry Potter, arcs and sparks, and I'm gonna wiggle my nose and dinner appears. No, it doesn't work that way. And there's no arcs and sparks. Real magic is as gentle as a baby's breath. And this is what eludes a lot of people who start studying magic. And nobody else will tell you this. And I'm telling you this. Real magic is gentle. Gentle as a baby's breath. Okay? It is done. It is what we are doing. And you heard me talking about, if you were here for the whole talk, you heard me use the term turning thought into form. As magical adepts, that's what we are about. We are about turning thought into form. Okay? So this old rogue witch with 44 years under her belt is trying to tell you, if you really want to learn this in an expedient way, first thing, start meditating 2 minutes a day. Maybe in 2 or 3 months, you might be able to move up to 3 minutes a day. Maybe after you get up to 5 minutes a day, you'll start doing 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes before you go to bed. That's the progression of this. And it might take you a year to do it. Okay? But that's not a big deal. You got your whole, and most of you are young, and you got your whole life in front of you. Okay? And the last thing I think I want to communicate to you is when you do magic, think in terms of longer term goals you'd like to see happen in your life. Not, I want a sports car. Okay. Don't start wishing to be a brain surgeon if you haven't been to medical school. Don't start wishing to be a famous rock star if you don't play a musical instrument. Okay? Don't anything if you're not already qualified. In my book, I talk about I produced a cable television program back in 1991 to 1993. Okay? I knew my trade. I was trained as an industrial filmmaker. Okay? Making a show about witchcraft was the wish. Okay? It took magic to make it happen. It took magic to open doors. Not to make the program, but to open doors to make it program that would be televised. It took magic to get a wire service article generated. Little 300-word article that went out on the wires back in the day. And over the period of the next 2 years, the host of the program and me, the producer, were the flavor of the week for over 90 different news organizations, and a third of them were in Europe. Okay? So magic should be more about long-term goals. People come to me all the time, well, I can't wait 2 years for a spell. I need it next week. You're using magic for the wrong thing. Okay? If you want to set a certain course in your life, dream about that thing that you want. Visualize yourself working in that profession or whatever the case is, and go out there and get the training to work in it. But use the force of the magic to open doors. A good comedian friend of mine, she had come up with this really, really great stand-up routine. Couldn't get it. The agent she was trying to contact was this battle-hardened secretary, and she didn't talk to anybody. Okay? So she did a ritual to get herself a door open. Just all she wanted to do was be able to talk to the agent for 5 minutes. She did. She did the ritual. A couple days later, she made a phone call. The lady that was battle hardened was out running errands. The agent answered the phone himself. She pitched him real quick, and he said, "Come on in, let me see what you got." She came in, demonstrated her comedy routine. He said, "I can't use you." She went home a lot dejected, but she got home and there was an answering machine message from the guy's colleague. He said, "I can use you. Come on down, let's talk." And I've had doors open for me just that way. Okay? So you learn how to do something really good, and then you use the magic to get the break. Okay? That's what magic's for. You're not going to learn magic to throw whammies on your friends or people you wouldn't throw whammies on your friends. You probably throw them on your enemies or people you perceive to be enemies. You don't throw magic on people. Oh, the movies show you that. Oh, she's going to throw a spell on you. You know how many people have come up to me in years? I heard you're a witch. Do you throw evil spells on people? Nah, it's too much work. It really is. It's too much work when you think about the mechanics of what you have to do. And it's mean. So I tell my students, be kind with your magic, be gentle with your magic, and think big. Think really big. Why are you going to piddle around to throw a little whammy on your girlfriend who slighted you when you've got the ultimate force of the universe at your fingertips and you can make your chart a course for your entire life? Your choice. You can piddle around and throw spitballs at your friends and enemies, or you can plan to change the course of your life. Okay. That's the important lesson I've wanted to teach you. Be kind with your magic. Be gentle with your magic. Think big. Think really big. And make some of that magic for the benefit of all beings, everywhere, every when. Now, some people in the craft community will tell you, well, there's no such thing as karma related to magic, and there's no such thing as karmic blowback. You do a bad spell, something bad comes back at you. I beg to differ. I've seen, it may not happen immediately, but boy, I have seen some people really eat it badly because of some bad stuff they did. Okay? There's no such thing as black magic. Black magic is neutral. Okay? Magic is neutral. Magic becomes bad based on the idea that you're putting a negative energy into it, a negative intention. Okay? Get rid of the negative intentions. You've got the ultimate, with training, you'll have the ultimate force in the universe at your fingertips. Think positively. Think generously. Make offerings for the benefit of everybody in the universe. Now, I hear some people saying, well, I'm not going to wish for other people. I'm going to wish for myself. No. Get yourself out of the formula. Selfless magic is the most powerful magic I've ever seen. And when you wish it for everybody else but yourself, the blowback is wonderful. Okay, but if you do an evil spell, the blowback is pretty nasty. Trust me. I've seen some very bad things happen to people who practice dark magic. Magic is not negative, not dark. You are the dark element in it because you're taking your negative, bad thoughts and manifesting negative, bad form. That's it. Thought into form is what we magical adepts do. And I'm running out of time. I'm Cheryl Costa. I'm your neighborhood retired witch, and I'll see you next week here on Mystical Mentors. John.